So today in our history series, we're going to talk about the origins of humanity, Earth and reality, and then if we have time, we'll get into the fall, duality, and control. So this will kind of explain what happened, why we're here, and I talk a little bit about this in the book, but we had a lot of questions, and Crystal has put them all together for us. So I'm very excited that it's going to be organized. And how are you, Crystal?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. All right. So here we go.
Hey. The first question is, where do we as a human species originate? I don't buy the Earth ape evolution nonsense.
Yeah, so humanity was created as the last big soul group that was created. There's been other soul groups created, but they're small. So there's not very many of those souls. And think unicorn, like a rare kind of soul. So humans are a compilation of all the soul groups. And they were created in the fifth density. So every single thing here on Earth is actually created. And the reason that they're similar is because most of the creators are the same being, so they're using a lot of the same formula. So,
Interesting.
yeah,
You mean like the creators being the same being?
they're
Oh,
the
okay.
same, yeah, same soul group, a lot of them, the ones who create the matrix in the first place. A lot of them are the same beings, the same actual souls that create that, or they get it started, or they help with it, and there's divine math that goes along with that. So there was a movie, it was called Divine Design, I think, and that's actually very pertinent to right now.
Interesting. I'll have
Yeah.
to watch it. Um, the next question says, based on thought creates, so like maybe they're saying when we think things, we're creating things. If we were that powerful, how did the cabal corrupt us in the beginning? Or did we allow it for life lessons?
Both. So, as far as so the whole earth was pulled down. So think about Earth as a person. Okay. So you're in a game and you're playing a game and somebody plays the planet. And then somebody sunk that battleship. Okay. So it's sunk down into a really dense, sticky, area of third density and it was pushed. So that sibling agreed to stay there and to help with lessons. So Earth became the hardest school in the universe at that point. But I don't think any of the beings thought that it would take as long as it has to come out of the lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a new experience, like we hadn't been that far, so we couldn't have known what it was
Yeah.
gonna be like. Um, Next question. Why was communication the main reason Earth was created? What wasn't working well in the universe for communication to be the goal? Why hadn't the communication plan worked? And there's more questions after that.
So think about the Orion Wars. Think about the way the Earth and not just the Earth, but the whole universe was set up for learning. And it was learning through confrontation, through friction, through polarity, and through the law of opposites. And it was very intense. So we really kind of hurt each other a lot. And soul families were at odds, just like human families were at odds. So, or have been lately. you know? So that was why communication was so important. And also, soul groups are slightly different. Like they have an ET is not the same as a dragon soul, they have a different point of view. So being able to have a conversation where one actually gets the point from the other is very important. And that wasn't really taking place. So Earth was created for that purpose. And then one of the beings that was always like pushing and creating chaos destroyed that whole plan, you know? Yeah.
Crazy.
So everything has taken longer to come out of polarity.
When you talk about the fighting in a family, the soul family, it reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita. Have you ever heard of it or read it or
I've
anything?
heard of it, I haven't read it.
I haven't read it either, but I've heard a lot about it because I used to kind of study along that pathway. And there's a battle in the beginning of the book. It's a story, maybe a historical, um,
Probably.
where like it's basically the same two sides of the same family are like fighting each other in this war, and like the main character Arjuna is like really torn apart because he's like, how can I, like my teacher's over there, he's raised me basically and taught me everything I know, and my grandfather's there, and how can I possibly do this? So it just reminds me of that, and all those are from like ancient India, and I don't know, that was probably like after the fall, obviously, but it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. I don't think the stories were as hidden in the past. So I can't remember. I think it is India, and I posted on Telegram, but there was a discovery of like 3,000 scrolls just recently, ancient. So all the discoveries are now coming up. I don't think any of the libraries were actually lost. I think they were stolen.
Yeah. I think I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. The scrolls, it's like a whole wall of, I think it was like eight, it was like some specific number, but it was like maybe in Tibet or something.
That one was in Tibet, but they have a
Oh,
new one. So there's all this information now becoming available. So it's exciting. And the other one was like 2 days ago, I think.
okay.
Yeah.
So there's more questions. There's probably like 6 questions or 7 questions in this. So about communication, why hadn't the communication plan worked? What did God want to learn from our communication? Were we supposed to communicate verbally or with our minds?
Both verbally and with the mind. So if you look at the language, ancient Greek, that was more of the real like language, the uncorrupted language. And obviously there were languages before that, but ancient Greek was not messed with, wasn't full of spells, and it actually had a lot more words that made sense with how people felt. So I feel like we'll go back to some sort of version of that, but I don't know about you guys, but words are hard to bring in sometimes because if they're corrupted, we don't resonate with them as well as we used to. So that's been really interesting because you're like in the middle of a conversation and the word doesn't come. So you're like
Like,
telepathy.
yeah, even
Yeah.
like the thing of words, like we'll use a word like incredible. Oh, that's incredible. But then I'm like, no, it's credible. Like, it's not actually not credible, but
Mhm.
um so the last part of this question, did they reset each time because the goal wasn't being met? Maybe with the communication plan?
No, the resets were to stop communication. They were to keep everybody in 3D. So the beings, I mean, it was one being that instigated everything, but there was definitely like a little gang of them. And they were really focused because they've become addicted to the 3D and how physical it actually was and what they could do here, because they could basically gain all this power from confusing the youngest soul group in the universe. And they were doing a lot of negative things here, but as soon as people would start to wake up, they would reset again. But now, universe, God, source. Source is more the most accurate to me, but was like, okay, we're done. Because it feels like you think about source, we're within source, we're inside of that body, of that huge being. And just think about like when your body's not working right, how does it feel? Are you satisfied? Or do you work on it? Or you take an herb or a pill or something to make you feel better? So source is done. It's like an autoimmune disease that doesn't want anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When you were talking about ancient Greek, is that the language that we were speaking before the Tower of Babel incident, where our languages were all, I don't know, screwed up, or they gave us?
Yeah. I get yes, but it feels like there was a lot of confusion right then. So depending on what timeline you're in, but it was very, very close right there. Yeah. And then pockets of it are still probably cultivated a little bit, but Greece is where you're going to see a more original language.
Okay. Moving on to structures. Are there other domed lands on Gaia?
No,
Or
no, they don't need a dome. Now, some of them might be in a dome underground, but not on the surface.
hmm,
So some of them have created domes for themselves underground. And I think that's just to, you know, I mean, things might fall or whatever. Because they're basically in an enormous cave system. Yeah.
yeah. What happened the day and the coming days when the dome was first put on this area of Earth? Were the people aware of it, and why were we all cut off?
So, there were not nice ETs, and that is basically where the dome came from. And it had to do with those same beings, you know. So think about Earth. They lost a lot of ground. They didn't get to keep the whole entirety of Earth in chaos. So they basically got relegated to one corner of Earth that the rest of the beings would put up with, that they had basically corrupted. And that's where humanity was. And humanity is now ready to break free. So the dome is now gone, but we still have a hologram, like a little grid up there that holds the blue sky in place. But we're not gonna, eventually that will go as well when humanity is ready. They'll just turn it off. So the good ETs are, I don't know how you would say it. Like, let's say somebody's very, very traumatized and you have a therapist that is working the person out of their trauma a step at a time. That's basically what's going on for humanity. So, as humanity becomes ready to see everything, we will. And it'll be much different, but it'll be one part of it at a time. Right now, we're kind of being bombarded, but it's the last stage of, are you going to wake up and be here in your body or not? Or are you going to go and ascend without your body? Yeah.
Interesting. Next question, honey, what is your take on the vapor canopy? Have you heard of it?
I have not heard of it. So, um, I don't know what the vapor canopy is. I do believe in the firmament because I can see it and it's like plasma. Okay, so thick. And space is thick. Now, we also have, we're in a terrarium. So you want to remember that. Like we also do have different, I don't know what you would call it, like what it happens in a terrarium where the water kind of comes together and forms little foggy, cloudy areas and then falls at night and then will turn into dew. And we're basically going to have that kind of a system more and more. As the weather is left alone, we're going to realize that, oh, we're, in a calm space and it's not all this chaos. Mhm.
Um, okay, moving on to the fall duality and control. Well, you kind of answered this one, but why could we not stay in the higher frequency? Why would Gaia allow herself to be hurt? And when was the last reset?
The last reset was like 1797 is when I usually get, like it's right around that time. And it was because in 1776 humanity was breaking free. So they did another reset. Um, and they were really, really happy when they did that. And then in 1850, by 1850, a lot of the places where they reset, it was repopulated at that point. But as far as like why did they allow that? They allowed it for learning. So think about Earth. So Earth has an oversoul just like we have an oversoul. And you have a multiverse going on. So one of these times decided, okay, I will fall. I will stay here and I will learn as well. And I will support humanity while that happens. But as we've gotten further and further along, she's grown more and more, Mother Earth, and has become less and less tolerant of what's been going on. And she has ETs and dragons and, huge beings and beautiful interdimensional beings that live beyond what we would call our borders. So she's got a lot of good stuff going on, and it's time to dismantle what's going on here completely and for humanity to move into happiness, good stuff, as I would call it, the fifth dimension, and learn in a different way without so much pain.
Hmm. Um, kind of already touched on this too. Why was the portion of Earth that was separated allowed to fall to the dark forces during all that time? Why were the evil bloodlines allowed to thrive here on Earth?
Well, I mean, it was a fight, you know. It was a continuation of the fighting that had been going on for eons. And when you think about like these beings that have come in to help, so Buddha and Jesus and Mary Magdalene and all of these beings, all these ascended massive beings, they were breaking through to try and break humanity out. And we also have to remember that it's a free will universe. So it's taken humanity because of the suppression a very long time to say no and to stand up for themselves. And they're just really getting it now. And there are still areas where people don't, you know, stand up for themselves yet. So that is also where you end up in the timelines, like in a slower timeline or a faster timeline.
Kind of makes me think of when was it the Israelites that left Egypt out of slavery and then they wandered around the desert for a while, and their God in the Bible was like a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of clouds during the day. And you were saying earlier that like the some creator beings that came here figured out a way to get power. And I thought before that like when we give our attention to something, we're giving them power. So if like a lot of people are doing that to one being, it almost like makes them a god, not the creator or source, but I feel like that's kind of, is that kind of how they created themselves as gods and things?
Yeah, and they saw themselves that way. So they would portray themselves that way, and humanity was so young. So think of it as you have a 20-year-old person, and then you have a 2-year-old person, or maybe a 3-year-old person. And that 3-year-old is going to believe what the 20-year-old is telling it, and it's going to follow suit. And also, they knew that humanity had that window of basically birth to, I always say 8 years, but a lot of people say 7, where they're so spongy and they can be completely programmed. So there were a lot of things working against humanity, and also their DNA had been distorted over and over again.
So, yeah, I don't know. Next question. Aren't there guardians to prevent such hostile interference on planets, especially for Earth, which was designed as a resolution hub?
Well, there are, but you also have to remember the one who, and the little gang who, came together that was creating the trauma. They knew all the secrets. They knew all the ways. And it was basically a big, you know, this going on in that family. So to preserve humanity, they had to do it the way that, the universe expected, which is basically allowing humanity to wake up and keeping that going until finally the universe said, no, we're not doing it anymore. We're done.
Yeah, because you mentioned free will before too.
Huh?
You mentioned free will before also. So like
Yeah,
what's
free will is very important. Sorry, the wind is crazy here.
it's okay.
I can hardly hear anything.
Oh, I think that's what I was going to say is like the free will of the humans. Because if we were naive and misled and we chose to worship these beings as gods and just go along with that and kind of giving our power away all throughout it, I mean, I could see how that would just be allowed to play out.
Yeah, it's kind of like watching, I don't know, somebody who has an amazing talent and they could do something fantastic and they could change the world with it. But they think that they're small and they don't think that they're capable of going out and changing the world. So they work for like somebody that keeps them suppressed and they just keep doing that. And they're wasting their talent. And that's kind of what humanity's been doing all this time because they had, I can't remember the name of that guy, but they basically had that syndrome where they
Oh,
worship their kidnapper.
yeah, Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome. Yeah.
Um, this is Interesting. Someone said, "How did we survive the resets? Sometimes I think I climbed up a tall mountain in Scandinavia to escape the mud flood." Did
Yeah.
people survive?
I think a lot of people did survive, but they also were then sought out to be gotten rid of gotten rid of them. A lot of people ended up in those asylums. Um, you know, they were really not treated well if they survived.
Yeah.
No. And I think there's been a lot of frequency too, like a lot of brainwashing and a lot of frequency that has been detrimental. So that's also been going on.
I feel like there's a lot of things that have been used against us.
Mhm.
Um, how many Earth cycles have taken place, and were there hard stops or resets, or were there continuous reincarnations since the origin of Earth?
There's been so many resets. I mean, I get 6 major resets, but there's been reset after reset. And they could just reset a whole country and then, basically not reset some of the other countries. We have to remember that there's been beings in control treating this like a board game and basically sucking all the energy they could get out of it. Yeah. They are gone. So, by the way, they're all gone at this point.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
important. Giving
it
us
is
a
really important. Yeah.
fighting chance. um, this person says the last reset is very interesting to understand. I wonder if it was played out the same way on all continents. Like in Europe, we have old church archives that go back to the start of 1600, where we can follow our family line from today backward several hundreds of years. Is this all fiction, or was the reset different in different parts of the world?
I think it was different in different parts of the world. Now, I do think they did a mud flood everywhere, but it doesn't seem like it was as deep in some places. And they really were concentrating on certain areas. So I don't know. It to me, it doesn't look as severe in Europe. So, and we've been there, and not to every country, obviously, but it doesn't look as severe to me over there. And it was a liquefaction event. So maybe the epicenter was more in the Americas. But I know Russia also had some pretty like intense, like a whole floor, or maybe even a whole, what you would call a building sunk. Yeah. So, oh, you're muted. Okay.
I was saying this was a related question to what was the real purpose or reason of wiping out the Americas with the meltology and mud floods?
I mean, that was the reset. It was to reprogram everyone. And then you had the incubator babies. You had beings that were only containing a fraction of a soul. So they were really easy to control. And I don't feel like they lived very long. Because when you think about when your soul isn't in your body when you wake up in the morning, how hard is it to get out of that bed? Like you feel like a lead weight. So and then your soul starts to filter back in. And a lot of times it doesn't happen that way, but everybody's experienced that a few times. And it's just a terrible feeling because you don't have energy. You don't have the energy that you need.
I've definitely experienced.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on this, well, how they did it, but this person asks, after the 1797-ish reset, who was responsible for the repopulation?
So that would be the 13 families. You can see even back in Tartaria, some of the giants, we'll just call them, that were, I don't know how tall they were, maybe 9 feet tall or whatever, but they still were doing, bless you, the hidden hand. There was still some of those symbols. So it wasn't perfect here during that time. It was better, but it wasn't perfect. And I think it was more evenly matched between the good and the evil, if you want to call them, those two sides. But once the reset happened, basically the evil took over at that point.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so you already answered 2 out of 3 of these questions. It says, how many resets have happened? How and when did they happen? And what did people experience during those events?
Well, I mean, chaos. They experienced chaos. We had about 6 of them. As far as when, it feels like it's different in every timeline, because time doesn't really exist. So we had ones before Atlantis, even. So the very first reset was the Titans. So, and there was a big war. And that's when the big trees were cut down because that was in the fifth density. Those trees were in the fifth density in the fifth dimension. So when that was pulled, that energy was pulled down, Mother Earth was pulled. It was because of the tragedy of that event. And that event was driven by the more negatively leaning beings, you know. And we have to remember that that's the way that the learning was set up, and don't really put a lot of endless blame and anger and feeling like a victim because of these beings, because they're gone and they basically refuse to heal. So that's why they're gone. So it's just like a cell when you have autophagy in the body and that cell is corrupted. There's pieces of the cell that are not working correctly anymore and they cannot repair themselves. So they go away because those beings were cells in the body of God Source. So that decision was made by Source. So remembering that is important. And basically, everything is a macrocosm or a microcosm of what's going on. Everything is very, very similar. So that was the first reset. And there's been many, many of them since. So one of them I consider to be this area where we are, where the first Egypt was. So the Grand Canyon, even the Mississippi is part of that, the Mississippi River. And that's ancient. Like when you look at the melted buildings here, they're so melted, eroded. You wouldn't, I mean, unless you knew what had gone on, you wouldn't really recognize what they were. And I didn't. For years, I didn't recognize what they were. And now I do when I look at them. There's also massive dragons, that have been, um, turned to stone. So I think really those are the first two. Atlantis would probably be the third. It feels like the third. Um, and then we had the Ice Age, and then we had the flood, you know. Um, and then we've had these other resets, that are smaller. But the last one was pretty big. The liquefaction event was pretty big, and that was done with frequency. And they've proven it in science.
Yeah, I think I've seen like a video of they have like a little fish tank with sand and a building and then water, and
Mhm.
they put some vibration on it, and the
Yeah.
building like sinks down into the sand. And there's so much evidence of it. Like people are digging down in like cities like New York City or San
Mhm.
Francisco, finding like other buildings, like other street level
Yeah.
way beneath where we are. It's very interesting. Um, was an asteroid thrown at Earth to change her rotation from clockwise to natural flow? Well, from clockwise, the natural flow, to counterclockwise as a reset.
No. No. So asteroids don't exist the way that we think, or that we've been told. And the dinosaurs there were a few dinosaurs, but mostly they were dragons.
Hmm.
So that was not. So when would that have happened? That would have happened when they put a dome up. They would have lost the beautiful temperate weather, you know. All this technology has been around forever. So they've had access to all the secret technology for so long, billions of years. So keep that in mind when you think about it.
So, does the Earth actually rotate? I mean, if she's a being and she has a toroidal field,
Barely.
her field that's rotating, and
Yeah. So the toroidal field, so Earth is a toroid, a toroid, and basically the top and the bottom have a firmament. The sides is smooth. So she's spinning a little bit, but she's definitely, I mean, the sun is local. So we need to remember that when we get wound up about, like, oh, well, the sun is affecting all of this stuff and the planets are not affected. The other planets are not affected by our sun because our sun is local. Now, there is a galactic center and a sun there, and there's lots of suns all over the place that are beings, but the way that we've been taught is, like, in my opinion, completely wrong. And that information comes from my soul.
so where did the was it the Artemis 2 crew? Where did they go?
Nowhere.
I saw an
They went
article.
nowhere.
Yeah, I like when you bring up Google, it just has articles there, and one of them was like, "Oh, the Artemis 2 crew has returned," and I'm like, I feel like that was such a big story when they left, and by the time they got back, no one was talking about it. I feel like.
No, nobody cared because social media went crazy showing all of the faux pas that they were doing. And I mean, then they said, oh, the first time we're going to go to the moon, this is the first time or whatever. And we're like, okay.
I was at someone's house because I was going to help them with something, and the launch was happening, so they brought it up on their phone, and we watched it, and I'm just like, they were showing like how it was kind of arcing, and
Yeah.
then it was almost like they were showing like a side view of it, and I'm like, how are like, is there a drone flying next to it that's filming it? Like, it was just so bizarre, and I was like, this doesn't make much sense at all, but whatever.
Yeah. I think it was created so that people would see that it was false. Because, I mean, doing all of those things where they were like there was a red dot on something that was, or all of those pictures that were released from their filming with their green screen behind them. And two of them were actually actors that had all of a sudden become astronauts. So if there's just too much stuff, and there's no way that they wouldn't have hidden more of it if they wanted people to think it was real. So they didn't want people to believe it.
And then there was like the toilet was broken the first day or something.
Oh, really? Gross.
Um, just one more question about
Okay.
asteroid question about the Earth changing rotation from clockwise to counterclockwise. When they put the dome, so there's the firmament over the whole top, that's
Yeah.
natural, and then there's the dome just over this area where they were containing the negative beings, so they didn't have full control of the Earth. Um, and then like the globe that they show us, and the Coriolis effect, they say, oh, there's like this band and the weather rotates this way as it's going this way, and down here it goes this way. Is that all created because of us being under a dome, and like the weather is just more like moving in a circle under
It
the
can
dome?
move in a circle, but they have Greenland and they have Antarctica where they've been controlling everything from. So they've recently just switched the ocean currents, and that will probably not be the same. Um, the ocean doesn't move violently beyond this area. It's more calm. And Earth, she tilts a little bit, she moves a little bit, just like you move, you move around, but it's not anywhere near what these huge, like, what was that called? The perfect storm or something, like where they were. Yeah, it is not like that. That's created. So those horrible ocean storms, all the hurricanes, everything is just man-made, basically.
I wonder too if that's kind of like an echo, or they're trying to bring up the fear of the resets in a way, like all the
Maybe, yeah. But they're definitely creating fear
yeah,
on
or even
purpose.
just like those destruction movies, like I forget the name of them, where there's like a huge tidal wave gonna destroy the city. It's like making us fearful of that when it's like what they did to us. I feel like
Yeah.
there's some connection there between like those kinds of movies and those
Hmm.
events.
Yeah. Past life memory.
Mhm.
Yep.
My last question.
Okay.
Is there a time period that we chose to reincarnate over and over, and why?
So the only ones that really were reincarnating over and over was the human consciousness, so the human souls. And they really didn't do that until the reincarnation wheel was installed. And I don't feel like they did that in the first dome because there's been more than one dome. Um, but I think the last one, it was present for quite a while because they were really trying to get people to not ascend and not realize who they were as a soul. So they trapped the souls, basically. Yeah. But that's gone too. That was eliminated in 2021. So, yeah. Yeah. So ask us questions, you guys. We really want to do a lot more of these. It was good to do this one. I feel like there's so much that's about to pop up, and really think about what it is that you want to relate to your own life, too. But hidden history, stolen history, it's been a huge thing for humanity because it's why we didn't, we weren't aware, why we didn't wake up right away because we were lied to. And now it's like every single movie is telling you some sort of truth. And in the past, it was like the really weird, obscure movies that nobody watched and they didn't promote. Those were the ones that were telling everybody the truth. And now all of them are. All the series, movies, everything is coming out with some kind of truth. I watched a Hallmark movie yesterday. It wasn't a movie, it was a series. And they were going back in time. So they were using water to go back in time and then come, back into the present time. So I'm like, okay, they're all focused on that. And that's because the consciousness has shifted and it's time for us to know how the universe actually works. So just pay attention to that stuff. The next few years are going to be mind blowing and wonderful. This year will be probably the most chaotic that we experience, I would say, over the next several years. So, yeah. Thank you guys. This is great. Thank you so much, Crystal. It really helps to have everything compiled and to have somebody asking me questions. So good. All right. Thank you guys. Love you. Bye.